I lived with a stranger pretending to be my cousin. I only found out on my wedding day. I trusted a distant relative who moved in after college. They acted like family, leaned on me emotionally and financially. On my wedding day, someone dropped a truth bomb. They weren't related. They'd lied for years. I navigated betrayal and reclaimed my trust and identity. When the woman adjusting my veil leaned in and whispered, "You know he's not really your cousin, right?" The room seemed to tilt, like the floor had quietly given up on me. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. The string quartet in the hallway hummed through the walls, a soft vibration in my ribs. My perfume, orange blossom and something powdery, suddenly felt too strong, like it was filling my throat. I watched my own reflection in the mirror blink back at me, eyes wide, lips parted, a stranger in white staring through the glass. "What?" I breathed, but she was already stepping away, smoothing the tablecloth like she'd just commented on the weather. That moment, suspended, unreal, would come back to me again and again in the months that followed. But to understand how deeply it cut, you have to know what my life looked like before that whisper split it in half. Before everything, my life was ordinary in the best way. I worked as a project coordinator for a small design firm downtown. My days were filled with coffee that was always slightly burnt, emails that never ended, and the steady comfort of routines. I liked knowing which bus would be late, which coworker would forget their lunch, which cafe had the quietest corner for thinking. My apartment was modest but warm. Sunlight pooled across the wooden floor every afternoon, catching dust in slow motion. I kept plants on the windowsill that I forgot to water more often than I'd admit. There was always music playing softly in the background, usually something acoustic, something that made the space feel lived in. And then there was him, the person I believed was my distant cousin. He showed up in my life a few years after I graduated college. My aunt had called, voice hesitant, explaining that a relative from another branch of the family needed a place to stay while getting settled in the city. He'd lost a job, had some rough patches, nothing dramatic, just life being unkind for a while. I didn't hesitate. Family was family. That's what I'd always been taught. He arrived with a single suitcase and a crooked, grateful smile. He was polite in a quiet way, always washing his dishes right after eating, always offering to pick up groceries if he noticed we were running low. At night, sometimes we'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, the TV murmuring between us, trading small stories about our days. Over time, the distance between temporary guest and part of the household faded. He stayed longer than expected, found freelance work, paid me back when he could. Some months he couldn't, and I told him not to worry about it.
I meant it. He leaned on me emotionally too, told me about his strange childhood, about never quite feeling rooted anywhere. Sometimes his voice would soften in the dim light, like he was talking more to the room than to me. I listened. I made tea. I offered reassurance, because that's what you do when someone trusts you. There was comfort in that rhythm. Two people sharing space, sharing quiet, sharing the small weight of everyday life. When I met my fiance, life expanded in a new direction. Our relationship unfolded slowly. Weekend walks, late dinners, laughter over burned pancakes. He was steady in a way that made my nervous system finally relax. When he proposed, my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the ring box when I opened it. Wedding planning filled every spare corner of my mind. Fabric samples, seating charts, phone calls that lasted too long. My apartment became a rotating station of lists taped to the fridge and sticky notes clinging to every surface. My cousin watched all of it from the sidelines, supportive but oddly subdued. He congratulated me, of course, helped carry boxes, even joked about learning to dance for the reception. But sometimes I caught a flicker of something in his eyes, a heaviness I couldn't quite name. The first real crock came one evening while folding laundry. I'd pulled one of his shirts from the dryer when something stiff brushed my fingers. A folded piece of paper slipped onto the floor. It wasn't a bill or a receipt. It was an old photocopy of a document, a birth record. The ink was faded, the edges soft from being handled too many times. The last name wasn't ours. I stared at it longer than I probably should have, my mind scrambling for rational explanations. Maybe a legal name change. Maybe adoption paperwork. Maybe I was missing something obvious. When he came home, I placed it casually on the counter. "This fell out of your shirt." He glanced at it just a fraction of a second too long before sliding it into his pocket. "Oh, yeah, old paperwork. Sorry about that." His voice was steady, his smile easy. I nodded and let it go. But something quiet had shifted inside me, like a hairline crack in glass you only notice when the light hits it just right. That night, the apartment felt different. environment. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. The air felt heavier. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself not to borrow trouble where none existed. I went to sleep with questions I didn't yet know how to ask. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice began to whisper that the person I trusted most in my home might not be exactly who he said he was. The days that followed, I tried to ignore the unease curling in my chest. Life moved forward. Wedding invitations, dress fittings, tasting sessions with the caterer. I smiled at guests, joked with my fiancé, laughed at my own clumsiness when I tripped over boxes of table decorations. But beneath it all, a quiet tension clung to me, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I started noticing little things.
Small inconsistencies in his stories, the way he avoided certain relatives when they called, the way he seemed to know just enough to sound believable, but never enough to feel truly rooted in our family lore. One night, we were in the kitchen. I was chopping vegetables for dinner. The knife made that soft, rhythmic thud against the cutting board. He leaned against the counter, idly flipping through a magazine. "Remember that summer at Aunt Marthy's? We built that rickety treehouse?" I asked casually. He paused, his brow knit for just a second, then smooth. Yeah, the one with the ladder that squeaked?" "Yes," I said, smiling at the memory. "You fell off it, didn't you? Scraped your knee on the third plank?" He shrugged, voice too even. "Probably. I don't really remember." Something in the way he said it, not the words, but the absence of them, sent a chill through me. I kept chopping, trying to mask it, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Then came the wedding dress fitting. My mother had insisted on coming along. As the seamstress pinned and prodded, my cousin hovered near the doorway, hands in pockets, smiling. But when my mother started talking about family stories, about my late grandfather and old photographs, he shifted uncomfortably, like a shadow in sunlight. I caught him pressing his lips together, eyes flicking to the floor. "Is everything okay?" I asked after a while, voice low. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just thinking about the seating arrangements." I didn't press. I didn't want to. But I wrote a small note in my mind. Something's off. The tension grew over the next few weeks. Gifts would arrive with no note from him, but in handwriting suspiciously similar to mine. Conversations would circle around family events, and I'd notice him watching me, gauging my reactions, as if measuring the truth. I began quietly asking questions to other relatives, casual, indirect, nothing overt. A text here, a social media post there, but everyone seemed to know him. Everyone spoke of him as if he had been family forever. I couldn't find a single person who questioned his presence in my life. Still, unease gnawed at me. And then, my wedding day arrived. The morning was serene. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, dust motes dancing like tiny golden sparks. My dress hung from the wardrobe, delicate lace catching the light. My mother fussed over my hair, humming softly, and my fiancé paced the living room with a nervous energy that was oddly comforting. I felt happy, calm, but somewhere beneath it, that faint, persistent whisper of doubt tugged at me, a shadow at the edge of celebration. The ceremony itself was a blur of white flowers, the warm hum of the organ, and the quiet rustle of tulle. I saw friends smiling, family exchanging glances, the officiant clearing his throat. Everything was exactly as it should have been, except for one moment that would change everything. It was during the reception, just as the music shifted to a softer tune, when my aunt leaned in with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "You know," she said, voice low, "he's really brave to show up today. Most people would have kept this to themselves." I laughed politely, thinking it was some cryptic joke I didn't understand. "Oh, what do you mean?" Her eyes darted around.
"I didn't want to spoil the day, but he's not really your cousin." The words sank in like stones in water. My champagne glass trembled in my hand, spilling a small circle across the tablecloth. I stared at her, then at him. The world tilted, faces blurred. The music swelled and then cut out, leaving only the ringing in my ears. The laughter around me sounded distant, hollow, like it belonged to someone else's life. He met my gaze for the first time all day. His eyes, my familiar, trusted eyes, were no longer comforting. They were apologetic, vulnerable, panicked. I didn't mean to. His voice was low, almost drowned by the chatter and clinking glasses. "You lied to me," I whispered, the words trembling on the edge of disbelief and fury. "For years." He swallowed. The room felt impossibly large, impossibly silent. I could feel the weight of betrayal settling over my shoulders like wet wool. Every shared meal, every late night conversation, every small gesture of trust I had given him, all of it now seemed fragile, manufactured, a lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to collapse right there and have someone, anyone, tell me it wasn't true. Instead, I took a shaky breath, and for the first time in years, I looked at him, really looked, and saw a stranger standing in the place where my family had been. I didn't speak for several minutes, just stood there, gripping my champagne glass like a lifeline, feeling the bubbles fizzing up and popping in my chest. Around me, the reception carried on, laughter, clinking glasses, the soft hum of a string quartet, and yet I felt as if I were underwater, distant from every familiar sound. He finally stepped closer, his movements hesitant. I wanted to tell you before, I didn't know how, he said, voice tight. His hands twisted at his sides, and I noticed the faint tremor in his fingers. You didn't know how? I echoed, disbelief lacing every syllable. You moved in. We shared a home. You borrowed money from me. You shared everything, and you thought that was fine? He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the floor. I was afraid. I just wanted to belong. I never meant to hurt you. I belong? I interrupted, my voice cracking despite my effort to stay calm. You lied about being family. You were nothing like the cousin you pretended to be. Everything I trusted, everything I believed, it was all a fabrication. His face fell, his carefully constructed composure shattered, and for a moment he looked like a child caught in the middle of something far larger than him. I didn't know how else to survive. I've been alone for so long. I thought if I said I was family, maybe I could have something stable, a place where I belonged. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him the cruelty of his actions outweighed any excuse. And yet, beneath the fury, I caught a flicker of something human, fear, loneliness, desperation. I had to remind myself that didn't make it okay. I trusted you, I said, softer now, though the pain still thrummed like a low drumbeat in my chest. I let you into my home. I let you into my life. And all this time, you were a stranger lying in my living room, laughing at my jokes, sharing my meals. And now, I paused, looking around at the smiling guests, all oblivious to the emotional wreckage behind my veil. Now, everyone here thinks he's family. Everyone thinks this is normal, but it's not. He flinched. I could see it. I felt a pang of pity, but I pushed it down. This was about me, my life, and my sense of safety. I need space, I said finally. My voice shook, but I kept my gaze steady. I need time to process this. Please, don't follow me. He nodded, shoulders slumping, and melted back into the crowd, leaving me standing alone amid a sea of strangers. I could feel my pulse racing in my ears, my chest tight, every muscle in my body vibrating with betrayal. The next days were surreal. I moved through life like a ghost, smiling when required, laughing at jokes that didn't reach me, answering questions about the wedding with mechanical politeness. Every corner of my apartment reminded me of him, the mug he always left on the counter, the plant he forgot to water, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the hallway. I realized I couldn't trust my memories anymore. Every dinner conversation, every shared laugh, every quiet night spent watching TV, all of it felt like a lie layered over reality. I felt hollow, betrayed by someone I had loved as family. And yet, beneath that hollow ache, a spark of resolve began to form. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the years of deception, but I could control what happened next. I could reclaim my home, my trust, my sense of reality. I started by setting boundaries. I asked him to return the spare keys he still had. I removed shared bank accounts and alerted friends and family quietly so they understood without judgment. I hired a locksmith to change the locks, small acts that made the betrayal tangible, but also made me feel safe again. Then came the confrontation I had been dreading, telling the rest of my family. I invited my mother and a few close relatives to my apartment. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock to a quiet, simmering anger as I laid out everything I'd discovered. You weren't really family? My mother whispered, voice trembling. I'm afraid not, I said. He lied. For years. There were tears, hugs,
hugs and gentle reassurances, and in that moment, I realized something important. While he had taken my trust, he could not take my family's love or the life I had built outside of him. The next weeks involved confronting him direct, not with yelling, not with spectacle, but with quiet, firm clarity. I laid out everything I knew, documented, and explained the consequences of his actions, legally, socially, and emotionally. He listened, mostly silent, occasionally whispering apologies that no longer reached me. Through it all, I discovered something unexpected: my own resilience, my own capacity to forgive without forgetting, my ability to rebuild trust in myself even when someone else had tried to fracture it. And somewhere in that healing, I began to understand the full lesson of the ordeal. Not everyone who calls themselves family will be, but the love you give wisely, the boundaries you protect, and the courage to confront betrayal, those are what truly define it. The truth doesn't stay quiet for long, especially families.
It moves like a current, slipping through phone calls and kitchen table conversations, reshaping the way people look at one another. I hadn't intended for it to become public in any dramatic way, but once my relatives understood what had happened, the story carried itself forward. A few days after I told my mother, she called me in the early evening. I could hear the television murmuring in the background of her living room, one of those low, steady sounds that usually meant comfort. "He came by today," she said carefully. My stomach tightened. "What did he want?" "He wanted to explain himself," she replied. "He said he never meant harm, that he just slipped into the lie and didn't know how to climb out." I leaned against the counter, the cool stone grounding me. "And what did you say?" There was a pause. I could picture her folding and unfolding the edge of a napkin, the way she always did when she was thinking hard. I told him that intentions don't erase impact, and that trust, once broken, doesn't belong to the person who broke it anymore. Her words landed gently but firmly inside me. I realized then how deeply supported I truly was. Over the next week, a few relatives reached out, not to interrogate, not to gossip, but to check on me. One cousin brought over soup. Another sent a handwritten note telling me how proud she was of the way I handled everything. No one defended him. No one minimized what he'd done. The family quietly closed ranks around the truth. He tried reaching out once more. A long message arrived late one night, my phone lighting up the dark bedroom. He wrote about loneliness, about fear, about how the lie had started small and grown too big to control. He apologized again and again, his words heavy with regret. I read it slowly, sitting on the edge of my bed, listening to the hum of traffic outside. I didn't respond, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I finally understood that closure doesn't always require a conversation. Sometimes it requires silence and distance. The practical consequences followed naturally. He was no longer welcome at family gatherings. Word spread through our extended circle. People who had once greeted him warmly now kept their distance or declined invitations that included him. It wasn't cruelty, it was a quiet recalibration of trust. I heard later that he moved out of the city, found work somewhere smaller, somewhere anonymous, a place where no one knew his story. Part of me hoped he would find the help he clearly needed. Another part of me simply felt relieved that the chapter was closed. In the midst of all this, I had to learn how to live inside my own space again. The apartment felt strangely empty at first, not physically, his belongings were gone, but emotionally. The echo of old routines lingered like a ghost. I rearranged furniture, donated extra dishes, opened the windows even when it was cold outside. I wanted fresh air, fresh light, fresh patterns. One evening, I cooked dinner just for myself. Simple pasta, garlic sizzling in olive oil, the scent filling the kitchen. I played music a little louder than usual. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, noticing how quiet no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful. My fiancé noticed the shift too. He never pressured me to move on emotionally. Instead, he listened when I needed to talk and held my hand when words failed. We took long walks after dinner, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about the future in small, hopeful ways. Paint colors for the house we hoped to buy someday, the kind of dog we might adopt. Trust, I realized, isn't something you rebuild all at once. It returns in fragments, in shared laughter, in honest conversations, in the simple consistency of someone showing up when they say they will. I also began to look inward, asking myself the harder questions. Why had I never questioned him sooner? Why had I equated kindness with truth? I didn't blame myself, but I allowed myself to learn. I learned that compassion without boundaries can quietly become self-erasure, that wanting to help someone doesn't require sacrificing sacrificing your own safety or clarity, and that sometimes the people who seem most in need of shelter are also the ones who can unintentionally cause the deepest harm. There were moments when anger still surfaced unexpectedly, in the grocery store aisle when I saw his favorite cereal, or when a familiar song played on the radio, but the anger no longer consumed me. It passed like a brief storm, leaving the air cleaner afterward. Healing, I discovered, is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is choosing peace over rumination. It is trusting yourself again. As the months passed, the betrayal began to soften into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding layered with firm boundaries. I didn't need him to become a better person for me to become a stronger one. And slowly, without noticing the exact moment it happened, my life began to feel like mine again. Time has a way of smoothing the sharpest edges of memory, not erasing them, just softening them enough that you can hold the story without bleeding. A year after the wedding, I found myself standing in the same apartment, barefoot on the cool wooden floor, early morning lights spilling across the walls. The plants on the windowsill were healthier now. I had finally learned their rhythm, when they needed water, when they needed sunlight, when to leave them alone. In a quiet way, they mirrored my own growth. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. My work was still busy. My fiance and I still argued about small, ordinary things, whose turn it was to do the dishes, whether the window should stay open at night, what movie to watch when neither of us could decide. But those disagreements felt safe, honest, grounded in truth. That mattered more than I ever realized before. Occasionally, someone would mention him in passing, a distant relative wondering aloud where he ended up, a mutual acquaintance recalling a vague memory. Each time, I felt a brief tightening in my chest, not pain exactly, but awareness, like touching a healed scar and remembering how deep the wound once was. I no longer felt the urge to explain or justify what happened. The story belonged to me, and I carried it with clarity instead of shame. One afternoon, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the slow choreography of people below, a mother guiding a toddler across the sidewalk, a cyclist weaving between cars, a man laughing into his phone. The city felt alive and indifferent in the best way. Life moved forward whether you were ready or not. I thought about the version of myself who had opened her doors so easily, who had believed a label without asking deeper questions, who had equated proximity with trust. I didn't judge her. She had acted from kindness, from optimism, from a genuine desire to help. But I was no longer her. I had learned that trust is not a gift you hand out blindly. It is something that grows through consistency, transparency, and time. That boundaries are not walls. They are doors you control. That compassion should never require the abandonment of your own instincts. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that identity is not defined by who you allow into your life, but by how you respond when that trust is broken. There were still moments when I wondered about him, whether he had found stability, whether he had learned to tell the truth without fear, whether loneliness still followed him like a shadow. I wished him no harm, but I also no longer carried responsibility for his healing. That too was part of my freedom. My wedding photos now hang in a simple frame in the hallway, not because the day was perfect, it wasn't, but because it marked a turning point, a moment when illusion gave way to clarity, when I chose to protect my reality rather than preserve someone else's lie. Sometimes I pause there, fingers brushing the cool glass, and remind myself how far I've come. Resilience doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up quietly, in the way you sleep better, in the way your laughter returns naturally, in the way your nervous system finally exhales. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that truth, even when it arrives painfully late, is still a gift. It gives you the chance to realign your life with what's real, what's honest, what's yours. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not avoiding betrayal altogether, but discovering who you become after surviving it. Would you have confronted him the same way I did? Or would you have chosen a different path? If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe or support the channel for more stories like this. Your presence here matters more than you know.